All right. I'd like to welcome to the stage two gentlemen that you've most likely already met once or twice today. Stephen's been on the grand tour. We've got Dr. Stephen Hicks, Atlas Society Senior Scholar, and David Kelley, Atlas Society founder. So I'm going to turn things over to them because I've already read their bios a couple times. So they're here to give us a session on 7 habits of highly objective people. And you have the booklet that David wrote for us in front of you, so you guys can all take a copy of that, as well as a handout. So with that, I will turn things over to you.
All right, thank you, Abby. All right, well, honored to be on the stage with you, David.
Same here.
So our topic is objectivity, which is a fundamentally important concept in philosophy and in our personal lives. And for those reasons, it's why Rand chose the name objectivism for her philosophy. Now, there's a lot of issues cognitively, epistemologically, psychologically about what objectivity is, whether it's possible, under what circumstances, arguments for and against. Some people end up in a highly skeptical position if they're not able to address those issues. But in addition to all of the more philosophical, strictly issues about objectivity, there's a personal issue about objectivity, how we take the approach to objectivity and a commitment to objectivity and make it part of the furniture of our minds, actually being objective. Now, the core commitment here is that while it's important to be imaginative and creative and so on, the objectivist small O line is ultimately, you can't just make stuff up. Right? Reality matters, the facts matter, and you ultimately have to be guided by that. Also, our emotions and our feelings are a hugely important part of our lives, but bottom line, just doing whatever you feel like is not your operative policy. Your feelings ultimately do govern in the context of an objective assessment of your life plan. So what does all of this mean? Well, not only in your personal lives, much of what we do socially. We get a huge amount of information from other people, from journalistic sources. We would like that information to be initially reliable. We want objective journalism so that that information can inform our own lives. And so in a context where there's very little guarantee of that, it adds a huge cognitive burden to our lives. We admire scientists with their commitment to objectivity and working out what objectivity means in the context of extraordinarily complicated data sets and experimental projects and logical and statistical and other mathematical tools that they are operating. How do they maintain that objective connection, given the importance of science to all of our lives? And I think all of us would like to have just a little more objectivity in our political discussions, where right, the stakes are high, emotions run high, and of course we all have our beliefs and commitments there. But how, if we are going to have an open society where a lot of things are going to be discussed and voted upon, that discussion goes as well as it possibly can, that is to say, as objectively as it possibly can. So the stakes are high, but the issues are complicated, and what this session is going to be focused on is David's work on taking the very general principles of objectivity and asking what one needs to do to operationalize those and to make them habitual in one's life. So here we are, sir.
Thank you, Stephen. Let me start here because the whole basis of objectivity is both the nature of knowledge, which is an issue in epistemology, and ethical rationality is a virtue. So that is the foundational basis. And if you notice here on the left-hand column, epistemology includes the perceptual level and the conceptual level. At the conceptual level, but what it means is that rationality is the virtue of basing your decisions, your beliefs, your actions, your relationships, all your choices on reason, rational understanding and knowledge. But unlike perception, reason is volitional. Perception, you open your eyes and you don't get to choose what you see. But when you are thinking, you can choose to evade or not. You can choose to explore for more evidence or consider yourself done, whatever. There are many, many choices. And reason is fallible. So we can make mistakes from any number of reasons, any number of causes, faulty reasoning, bad information, or whatever. So objectivity is the cardinal virtue here. Ayn Rand, the quote on the right-hand side from Ayn Rand is that it brings out the ethical side of morality. There's no greater, nobler, more heroic form of devotion than the act of a man who assumes the responsibility of thinking. And in a previous section, I commented on how her heroes in her novels are all heroes in part because of their commitment to reason. What is objectivity? It involves two essential things, two essential elements. One is a commitment to finding the truth, recognizing that reality is what it is, independent of what we think or feel about it. Facts are facts. Wishing will not make it so. That we have many, many phrases that are not peculiar to objectivism, but objectivism says, yeah, those are right, those are correct. Keep them in mind. But two, facts don't reveal themselves to us automatically or without effort or without the possibility of error. So we have to use the methods of reason. And that is a cognitive capacity that has a particular nature. It operates in a certain way. Ayn Rand spelled out in some detail how concepts work. I've been working on epistemological topics for many, many years, and I've some other things I can add. But it is it's subject to specific constraints. Just the most obvious one, which I don't even mention when I get to the 7 habits, is we all have a small attention span. There's a famous essay in psychology called the magic number 7, plus or minus 2, in the 1950s. And Rand had the same concept when she referred to the crow epistemology. We can only hold a certain number of things in mind, so we have to choose what we're thinking about and how. And that's one of the proper ways to use the methods of reasoning. Now, I want to go on and talk about the 7 habits. As Stephen mentioned, I wrote a short booklet, what the 7 habits here. This whole topic is one that has fascinated me for many years. You have a copy, and hopefully you'll read it. I hope I'm not being too immodest by saying it's a short and fun read. So you know what you're doing tonight. If you're not going to the gala. No, you should go to the gala. But The Art of Reasoning is a textbook I did now in its 5th edition. The first one came out in the late 1980s. And for this one, the 5th edition, we added a new chapter on cognitive bias. And there's a large element of important facts there that can help anyone be more objective and relate in some cases to the 7 habits. So what are the 7 habits? I'm not going to go over all of these in detail because we don't really have time. You'll have a handout and you'll on your tables, and you have the booklet to follow up on. But one is, my first one is, what is my purpose? Thinking, we use our minds for lots of different things. Am I just trying to acquire knowledge, like a student in a classroom, or a reader looking up something? Am I trying to persuade someone? Which means my focus needs to be a little different. I have to focus on the person I'm trying to persuade and what they need to know and where we disagree. I'm out with my beloved, and are we for a nice dinner? Are we having a meeting or a date? If it's a meeting, to talk about the kids or what are we going to do about them, or is it a date where we just get to enjoy each other alone and celebrate our love? So there are many, many different purposes. But knowing which is yours is actually important in terms of another cardinal value, purpose. But it's important in cognition. How do I know this? This is habit number 2. How do I know this? What are my sources? We hear a lot. It's almost everything we know comes through other people by testimony. Your knowledge of history, obviously, your knowledge of world events that you didn't witness yourself personally, which is almost everything that happens, and so on down the line. So we have to know whom to trust, which scientists, and there are important debates about like with global warming. Some you can't just say follow the science, because if there's disagreement among scientists at a level you are not conversant with, well, you just have to make a judgment. And it's also important to ask, what am I assuming? We're still on point 2. What am I assuming? Because often our thinking is driven by assumptions that are not in that window of the crow, a window of what we're paying attention to now, but they can affect us, the way we frame an issue. And so this is, I'll get to this in a moment. It's one major source of confirmation bias. A third one, am I sure? Well, what is certainty? Certainty is not psychological, the feeling of psychological certainty. It is the epistemological status that all the evidence supports this conclusion, and this conclusion is not consistent with at least some of the available ones. Take a whole body of evidence you have. If there's only one thing that it can explain it all or is consistent with it all, then you can be certain. This is basically what happens in criminal trials, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubts are based on evidence that doesn't fit. But if there is no such evidence, then you can be certain. Not much of what we know can be totally certain, because it's way up the conceptual chain, depending on our people's view of the world, their view of ethics, and so forth. And so one good thing, one useful heuristic, which is in my Art of Reasoning book, it comes from really a top poker player, Annie Rice.
Duke, D-U-K-E.
Annie Duke, yes, thank you. She has a thing. You believe something, okay? You want to bet? How much money would you put on this? That this is true? It will actually turn out to be true. And there's quite a few experiments that have been done with this by cognitive psychologists. But that has a way of sharpening one's mind. Okay, am I going to put $100 on this? No, not yet. I'm not sure. So it's a good heuristic. I mentioned that as one of the more interesting things. The fourth one, what would I take as evidence I'm wrong? This is so important, I can't over-exaggerate. This is the way of dealing with the confirmation bias. Let me move on here. Confirmation bias is a tendency to look for and take account of evidence supporting a conclusion, an assumption, or a hypothesis, while ignoring, downplaying, or failing to seek evidence against it. It's one-sided thinking, and you don't have to go far in this world to find many, many examples of people doing that. It happens all the time. Social media, but it didn't start with social media. Francis Bacon, 500 years ago, was writing about this tendency back long before there was an internet. And part of it is because there's, on any issue of any complexity, there are so many aspects that really, to be fully certain, it's good to check your premises, as Ayn Rand said. It's good to go back and check by talking with someone else, talk with people who have a different view. Why do they believe differently? If they have some point they can point to as strong evidence, and you haven't thought of that, well, now's the time to think about it. and take it into account. Or even without someone to talk to. Psychologists who study confirmation bias say it's almost as good just to consider what evidence would count against your view. Just, step back for a minute from the whatever issue you're talking about and ask yourself, maybe I'm wrong. How can I be wrong? Well, if you try to do the thought experiment honestly, could I be wrong about this? How? What would be? That's it. That can be an excellent way to also to judge the degree of certainty you have and should have in your conclusion. And the last thing, shift your focus from proving you're right to getting it right. A lot of us go into discussions thinking, I know what I believe, I'm going to prove it. You disagree, I'm going to whip you with arguments into submission. And that's a kind of attitude that never works. I've lots of experience I can back that up on. Shift your focus to, I don't want to be right. I want to get it right. I want to get things right. I want to understand. It's just false self-esteem to think if I win, that I have to prove my point by winning an argument. It's not about me and someone else. It's about me and reality. Okay, moving on. This is one that occurs in social circumstances. Is that the real reason? What is the essential reason I believe this? It comes up, just a simple example, which I think I used in the book. As a young guy, I knew from, as I was learning how to date and, enter that whole world, I ask a girl out, and she might say, "Well, I'd love to, but I can't. I'm doing something else. I already committed to this, but let's keep it in mind." And so the second time I call her for something else. Oh, gee, my pet just died. I can't. And the third time, if you call the third time and it's, "Oh, I'm doing my hair tonight. I'm sorry, I can't." 3 strikes and you're out. She's not giving you the real reason. She's giving an excuse. And there's a real temptation to do that in social circumstances. But it also has a philosophical meaning, because if you ask people, and I'm going to take our local political network, take the libertarians, why do you believe in freedom? Well, because it's economically productive. You think, well, yeah, okay, I agree, but is that the real reason? Human rights, human independence, your own life, that you want to live your way. You didn't mention that. Isn't that a foundation? Isn't that why you like a free market? Well, yeah, of course. But people give in arguments, they'll sometimes make the argument they think is more acceptable. And that's not, that's an understandable fault, but it is a fault. Number 6, does anything matter more to me than the truth? I mean, some parts of reality are pretty threatening. I mean, you learn about, a spouse's infidelity, or a child badly failing school, or a disaster that killed someone you really, cared for. That can be threatening, and our self-esteem, our emotions in general, but self-esteem in particular, gets involved. We're not Dr. Spock, pure computer-like reasoners, and so that leads to the next one: can I be objective now? There are times objectivity is the core of rationality, and that's a universal virtue. There's never a time when it doesn't work, or any context of life in which rationality doesn't matter. But there are times when, fatigue, high emotion, sorrow, loss, emotions at a certain point can interfere with thinking. And so be self-aware that that happens. And if it happens, like they say to school kids, put your head down and count for 10 and come back to it when you're ready. So that's the summary of the Cook's tour of the 7 habits. We now have time. There's some questions on the table that Stephen and I prepared for you to discuss. We suggest we isolated the top 3, which are let's see.
I'll go click ahead to them. Also.
Do you have? I have this somewhere. Oh yes, the top 3. Which of the 7 habits do you find most difficult to acquire? Secondly, how can you co-develop introspective skills, including emotional memory and emotional states, to be more compatible with rationality and the 7 habits? And are some domains more challenging to apply these in than other domains? For example, more complex issues, frontier zones of uncertainty, or value prominent issues. And I would also say, social, close connection, family issues in particular. So with that, I'm done. But we have time left, so if you'll just talk at your tables, and ideally, every one of you can take these away and think about them. But we thought it might be profitable for people at the same table to just talk for a bit about all this. So I said there are only 2 here, a couple here. So
Consolidate.
feel free. Don't be shy about joining other tables.
Hello, everyone. All right.
All right, we're gonna bring everyone back
wrap
together.
this portion of the session up.
Hello, 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 hello.
Okay.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you for your attention again. Conversations were quite lively from this perspective. I do want to mention you do have David's 7 Habits booklet, which is useful for working through, and those who really want the deep dive. The Art of Reasoning is a now classic logic text. I've used it for years in my logic courses at my university. 5th edition, well worth your time for becoming a lean, mean thinking machine, as I like to put it. But we did want to ask Jay LePere to come up. At your table, there's a sheet with some laetrim, not all, but okay, but yes, good. So on one kind of business application of the 7 habits of highly effective people, how you turn that 7 into a highly effective corporate culture or business culture. So a few words from Jay LePere.
Just part of what we spend a great deal of time discussing is how we apply these principles in our lives. I think Stephen used the word operationalize in what we do. And I think this sheet, which you don't have at all the tables, but is at some of the tables, and we'll have more copies coming. This was the product of taking some of the work that Stephen had done and then influencing and then reading the 7 habits and converting it with work groups inside a company, saying how would we go about using this for ourselves to prepare for particularly contentious meetings. And we use it constantly. So, and it's just a simple way, a simple cheat sheet of working through it. So this is incredibly valuable in business when there are complex discussions, as is all the principles of objectivism are. But this is a really good one. Anyway, you'll get a copy later.
Oh, thanks for that.
Next time.
I would say give it a shot.
You can set up the PowerPoint projector.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Grossman, CEO of the Atlas Society. We are the leading nonprofit organization engaging young people with the ideas of Ayn Rand in fun, creative ways, including graphic novels and animated videos. If you want to help us in our moonshot to engage 1 billion young minds with the ideas of Ayn Rand, then please consider supporting our nonprofit work with a tax-deductible donation at atlassociety.org. Thanks.